must begin to face up to the fact that if we continue emitting vast quantities of the greenhouse gases, we're going to face a global temperature rise larger than anything experienced in human history.
Climate change. It's a very real thing. The most basic way to see this is fluctuations in the weather with the changing of the seasons. But over the last few decades, there has been a torrential debate within science and politics on global climate change that is threatening to engulf the rest of us in the deluge. It was argued in the 1970s that we were entering into another ice age. When the weather turned and the global temperature warmed, it was decided that we were entering into a catastrophic global warming era, and it was a man-made phenomenon. Industrial waste, car emissions, human beings in general, were emitting too many greenhouse gases and CO2, and if the general population of the Earth didn't curb their emissions very soon, all the ice caps would melt, the world's coastal regions would flood, and the world would become an inhospitable place for any mammal to live. The real problem, many scientists and government officials argued, was that there are just too many people, and the skyrocketing global temperatures was simply the reaction to that innate scientific truth.
Well, there have been riots in some countries recently. What do you make of all of this?
The resources of the planet just can't keep up with the demands, and I'm afraid that this is going to be more commonplace. I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. It's very complicated, I do want to say, because agriculture is complicated anyway. And as, for instance, China adds more cars, they need more roads. And the only place to put roads in China is over farmland. So you lose farmland as you increase development. Yeah. We're doing it even here in the United States. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
Do you think we'll do it? I mean, are you optimistic in the end that that the world will come to its senses?
On behalf of my grandchildren and the children all over the world, I absolutely think we got to do it. But not doing it is suicide. Just like dropping bombs on each other, nuclear weapons is suicide. We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming.
There is no debate that the global temperature has risen in the latter half of the 20th century, but are human beings to blame? Is there an answer scientists have agreed upon?
We are able to map out the temperature through the 3-kilometer ice sheet. Now that temperature, if we do it precisely enough, thousandths of a degree accuracy, then the ice has not forgotten how cold or warm it was on the surface at the time the snow fell. So, using those temperatures, we have been able to reconstruct the temperatures of the last 10,000 years.
The temperature data from the ice sheet reveal long periods with much higher temperatures than those we experience today. They tell a fascinating tale of natural temperature fluctuations in the northern hemisphere, from times when man had no influence on the climate whatsoever.
Now, as we approach our time, we can see that in the period between 4,000 years ago and back to the period 2,000 years ago, which is actually the Roman age, the temperatures have been decreasing in Greenland by 2.5 degrees. Then the temperatures increased gradually up to a maximum point around the medieval warm period, we call it 1,000 years ago. And then temperatures declined and goes down to a minimum around 1650 AD, comes back up a little in the 18th century, and then around 1875 we have the lowest point in the last 8,000 years, right here, and that matches exactly the time when meteorological observations started.
The most iconic image of the global warming debate is Michael Mann's climate hockey stick. There has been a debate over the hockey stick data since it was first shown in the 2001 IPCC report. IPCC assessments and reports are generally regarded among scientists studying climate change as accurate summaries of the state of knowledge on the topic, yet criticism is growing at how government scientists are skewing the reports to fit their climate models.
The most common failing I find is in the selective use of evidence. People, perhaps naturally, tend to reject evidence that contradicts their favorite theory or hypothesis. That's quite common. It's now been institutionalized in the following sense. Take the IPCC, for example, the UN panel on climate change. They write fairly decent reports. The reports typically are 800 to 1,000 pages without index. Nobody can read them, really, unless you, like myself, unless you're one of the reviewers and you have read through the report. And then a small group of government scientists gets together and writes a summary for policymakers. The ones that I've seen are very selective. They reject evidence that would cast any doubt on human causes of global warming. And naturally then they come up with statements like, there's evidence for human causes of global warming. They have to be careful, because the report itself doesn't say that. But you can word the summary in such a way as to suggest that the preponderance of evidence or the balance of evidence suggests human causes. And that's what they do.
Fear has flooded the collective consciousness over the melting of polar ice caps and the rise of global sea levels, and future climate models predict that many coastal areas with metropolitan cities will be underwater in a score of years. Disagreement over this future prediction can be found with observational scientists such as Professor John Christie.